think we're live now.
Okay.
Hello and welcome. I'm John from Broadsheet. Welcome to Tomorrow Tonight. We're joined, very honoured to be joined by Bernard Purcell, London-based editor of the Irish World. Good evening, Bernard.
Good evening, John.
How are you?
I'm grand. Yourself?
I'm not too bad. How is London this week for the big Easter bank holiday?
Well, had a couple of sunny days, so people were out in force, and the last day or two has been quite wintry and cold. But there's signs of activity, but it's still quieter than one might normally expect.
Were you out and about yourself?
Well, for a walk and up the high road, but not much further.
What is your distance there? Is it like 5K?
It's not specified in the same way. It's reasonable. We've seen instances of it being stretched by, say, Boris Johnson on a bike going up to the Olympic Park some months ago. So it's been fudged a bit. Within London, outside with some constabularies, you'll get them getting a bit over-interventionist, but I think a softer touch is required. It's the more sensible police departments don't want to get involved in that.
Yeah, and on the tube and stuff, I mean, you wouldn't...
It started to pick up in the last couple of days, but most tubes and buses have been pretty sparse.
I was going to ask you, because I know that you had the first dose of the AstraZeneca, Bernard, and it's in the news today in terms of not being given to, at least not being given to children. Is that the latest?
The latest is that it's been found risky in some instances in under 60s, and because of that, the European Medicines Agency and one or two others have found out of a vast number of recipients, they have found some evidence to suggest that it has been linked with brain clots, and there have been some fatalities. So what has been suggested that Oxford, which is developing it, has said that it's going to hold back, or it's been advised to hold back on testing it on children or younger people for the time being until they've got to the bottom of this. And it's always a balance of risk. I mean, the point has been made, for instance, with younger people, they've got less, and by that I mean children and young adults, they have less risk of catching COVID. Therefore, vaccinations, which pose a risk anyway, pose a higher risk than they might pose in those who have a much greater risk of catching COVID.
When you had the first dose, I think the EMA were saying something completely different. Well, not completely different, but they were indicating that it was okay.
They have, and they still say that on the balance of risk, for those who are at risk, there's a great, well, for most people, there's a much greater risk of COVID and much greater risk of harm from COVID than there is from the vaccination. So okay. That is still acknowledged, even by those who have identified these cases of clotting.
Okay, and you've the second dose in May. Second dose in May.
End of May.
End of May, and you're going ahead with that. There's no.
Yes.
Okay, and that
because I mean, it's not solely a question of self-preservation. Anyone who it's a public health issue. You do not want to be a carrier, either asymptomatic or you don't want to risk others either within your household or around you by being vulnerable to infection.
Right, and there was nothing really. I mean, the blood clot thing had come up last week, even the week before, hadn't it?
Well, increasingly, people are going to find out more and more as things go along, but it's still a balance of risk.
Yeah,
and it is a public health issue.
Right. Okay. The Irish World is available in Britain tomorrow and Ireland on Thursday.
Yeah.
I just want to share the front page. This is the path out of lockdown for UK residents.
Primarily England, because Scotland and Wales are following similar paths, but on different timetables.
Right, and it's vaccine certs and twice-a-week tests.
Yes, as
everyone.
Sorry, please go ahead.
No, is that for everyone, Bernard?
At the moment, Johnson is facing a mutiny amongst his own MPs, and also Labour has indicated that the idea of people requiring what are called vaccine passports would be fundamental. Un-English, I think he probably said it wrong. I'm British, actually, I think he said you're correct. But sometimes it's a question of giving it a name. Vaccine passports makes everybody rail in opposition, but the idea of certification, which Johnson was at pains to try and use that new nomenclature in Downing Street on Monday, is less, it's a more euphemistic term, and it's broadly in keeping with what people are used to in terms of foreign travel. And Johnson himself admitted that he sees that's going to be inevitable in terms of permitting foreign travel, that you will have to have some kind of proof of either being COVID-free or having been vaccinated. It's in the domestic sphere that it really poses difficulties for public opinion. The idea that people might require some kind of proof of non-infectiousness in going to the pub or to the theatre, although in practical terms, I think people, certainly the owners of the businesses, welcome it. They just don't want to be the ones enforcing it because of any number of practical issues. I mean, how do you enforce it? Whom do you discriminate against? It's very, very tricky. So it's a bit of a fudge at the moment. And one of the ways that Johnson has managed to keep it at arm's length for a while is to say that they do not yet have a specific proposal. So until such times they have a specific proposal, they have nothing to go to MPs to seek their approval for. But it is increasingly forming the kind of shape of the government's policy. On the question of the twice-a-week vaccinations, they're the lateral flow tests, which there was a pilot test in Liverpool and in Birmingham, and they're much more rapid, much cheaper test, but they are not as reliable as the gold standard PCR tests, and they've had a very low accuracy rating. It's a bit like, say, the old joke about using the seaweed to tell the weather. If you stick it out the back door, check it overnight, and if it's wet the next day, then it means it's been raining. The lateral flow tests will, if you are showing signs of symptoms, well, then they will tell you whether you've got it, but they're not all that accurate in terms of asymptomatic identification.
Is that why you're doing 2 a week then?
Yes.
Okay, because they're not that accurate.
They're not that accurate, and in the field, and there have been very significant concerns expressed by some epidemiologists and other experts in public health because they feel it will give a false sense of security, or people might just rely on that because it's certainly people who have used them. The prospect of not being able to afford, not going into work, or facing a whopping fine if they are found to have been symptomatic will deter people. So they are worried about the false sense of security that will come from the less accurate tests. They are being funded by the 37 billion test and trace budget allocation as well.
Okay. Decision time on the National League and All Ireland series could be set. This is London GAA, obviously.
Not just London, Britain.
Britain, yeah. How many teams get to take part in?
Well, there's Warwickshire, there's Scotland, there's Yorkshire, and there's London. And I've probably left someone out, but and no doubt it will be drawn to my attention with great force and indignation. And then there's the Provincial Council of Great Britain, but it's Scotland, Warwickshire, Yorkshire, London.
And obviously nothing happened last year. And
if you ask anybody in GAA here, they will generally tell you they're used to being treated as second class. And they will, some of the older ones will also point to the fact that the heroes of GAA, Sam Maguire and Liam McCarthy, were from London, and they're treated like second class people back in Ireland.
That's terrible, isn't it?
It's a long time ago, and I think most people are over it.
Oh, right, okay. But it's not the case anymore. They're treated with respect now.
Well, London is in McCarthy and Maguire, yes, but they're long dead, so it doesn't.
No, I mean, in terms of the English GAs are treated well by the Irish headquarters. No,
Connacht has been pretty good to London because London is in Connacht for the purposes of the
Right.
Ireland, and there's a couple of individuals there who kept faith, and but because you won't have the same pool of talent to draw on. One of the holy grails here is perhaps, certainly in London, or indeed if you are in Warwickshire, to have a team of homegrowns. And so you have some initiatives like the in May, June, July, the All Britain or the ABCs, to encourage homegrown talent. And there are some clubs south of London, which certainly up to once they get past, say, teenage, they've had a really good and encouraging mix of players that look much more like a London side than elsewhere. But incidentally, last week we had an article on an NHS nurse over here who's also a rapper who's on the rise, but he's a former Meath miner who came up, but he's originally from Nigeria, but he has a complete knobber accent. And that, so when you see things like that, you do actually get to see welcome signs of the kind of new face of Ireland. And we've had we've featured a number of instances like that.
Oh yeah,
including players who grew up in one of the not detention camps, reception, whatever they're called, the
direct provision.
Yeah, that's the name for them, the euphemism.
Yeah, yeah, the euphemism. We have a look at the tomorrow's papers then.
Absolutely.
These have just come up, and hopefully we'll get the mail
well, I've got the UK mail here anyway, but
yeah, okay. The Irish Examiner fully refuses teachers' vaccine demand. They're threatening, I gather they're threatening strike action if they're not prioritised for vaccines, the teachers.
Yes, I've seen that, and if there's a genuine risk of the infection, well, one has every sympathy for them. But I think the main teachers' union, I think it may be the ASTI, didn't endear itself to a great many people over the conduct of the exams last year, did it?
No, the INTO, the Irish National Teachers Organisation. Is that one?
Oh, well, that's primary school, isn't it? So the risk balance there is supposed to be considerably lesser, because you're talking about much younger kids. But sometimes looking at it from afar, over here, because we're not as across the Irish issues as say people on the ground there would be.
Yeah.
The government response, and everybody has sympathy for the task they're facing. It does seem to be all over the place and contradictory.
Right. Again, these are sort of similar. Possible cap on numbers allowed into the country, and then Donnelly trying to close the medical travel loophole. This is in respect of dental people for Portugal and the cosmetic surgery people in Dubai.
Well, we're only over a year into it.
Yeah. Doesn't that just make you go, hang on, there's something up here, no?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you've been following Home of the Year is a very big show here at the moment, or a sort of ratings winner. The winner was chosen tonight. Disco Home in Style. All right. Anyway.
So it's property porn is back.
Yeah, but more kind of fixer upper, I suppose.
Oh well, that's I'd say a lot of people have turned their hand to DIY during lockdown. So
yeah, I think it's a bit posher than DIY, but yeah. Virus app not helpful. This is quite interesting. A Cork public health doctor said she was not aware of a single case of COVID-19 among the 26,000 cases that have occurred in Cork and Kerry since March 2020, where the COVID tracker app led to its detection.
There's been similar experience with the app over here. It's been quietly brushed to one side, and they're hoping that it may have some possible utility if they are going to introduce the kind of vaccination passports or certification in an app. But it's been quietly just erased from public gaze.
Yeah, same here. Nobody mentioned it. Was huge fanfare when it was launched. I wasn't actually sure how it would work, and
well, there are all sorts of issues of who has access to medical information, what kind of database do you refer back to, and these will be issues that will come up with the passports or the how are you going to establish if they're genuine? Will they refer back to a centralized database? What are the privacy implications of that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I mentioned it the other 2 weeks ago, that the passports are very on Boris, aren't they, in a way? I mean, he's usually sort of, his antenna is up for that kind of thing, but he seems to, and he's created sort of distance between him and Starmer in a sense, some kind of difference.
Yes, he has, but Starmer has now actually taken hasn't come down on a fixed position yet, but the rhetoric, I mean, including Ashworth, I think the Shadow Health Secretary said that it would be beyond the pale to have to show a vaccination passport to go to Next or to any of the shops to go shopping. So, and they could probably be on pretty populist ground on that one.
Yeah, but it leaves him quite exposed unless he drops it soon. Really, it could sort of drag on.
Sort of exposed. He's got a majority of 80 seats, and he's got another 4 years parliamentary term. They have gotten away with things that they might not have gotten away with had the election not happened and given them that majority. And it is widely felt that they are not accountable in the way that they might have been. That David Cameron story I told you last week that has been brewing has legs. People are asking why he still gets 116,000 a year allowance, while looking to intervene to help a private firm that now seems to have brought several casualties down, including what looks like the biggest single wipeout of a fortune ever in New York, at Chucko Bill Fong. Now that's a knock-on effect because that's the Egos Bank, but Greensill is connected in some of its mezzanine financing. You'll find that the stories that are turning up in a kind of jigsaw way, particularly when it comes to finance and leverage. So you'll find that dots will, over coming weeks, the FT has started it, I think about 6 weeks ago, to minor fanfare, and then gradually there's a net of coincidences that would, under, even if there was no fire there in other times, would have led to all sorts of calls for either inquiries or proof of innocence or virtue.
Yeah, that's how I feel about the Tories, that I don't think they'll last the pace in terms of the popularity. And I think this stuff is catching up with them a little bit. And I do think on the vaccine passports, he's misjudged it, or at least he's obviously not making the decisions, but I mean, he's stuck with it.
Well, he's not known for his thoroughness or for his application. And he certainly wasn't as Foreign Secretary, and he certainly wasn't as Mayor of London. But there are signs that he's had some good people around him. But somebody pointed out the other week that Rishi Sunak issued leaflets endorsing candidates in next month's local elections without once mentioning Boris Johnson. So really? People are talking about the Rishi Sunak party.
Yeah. He's definitely been groomed for the role, isn't he?
Well, or he's grooming himself, but yes. But he's
this is
sorry, go on.
No, please, Bernard.
No, please continue. Go on. The Irish Daily Mail. Teachers must wait their turn. Yeah, there seems. I mean, maybe it's the Fine Gael always seems to like to put it into the teachers. Maybe they lead with their chins and they go straight into conflict. But it seems to be. They seem to be at times a handy whipping boy for. Certainly Fine Gael, quite possibly Fianna Fáil as well.
Well, I think that one of the last unions to have real power, really, in a sense.
Well, they're not in a bad number, but on the face of it. But I'm sure many of them have been working pretty hard to get their under considerable disadvantage, getting their classes through.
Norma Foley I personally don't so warm to her, but I mean, do you think she's doing a good job?
I could not say with any authority.
No.
I don't. I mean, all I see is the same headlines you do, and read around it. But I certainly wouldn't have. I could not speak with any authority on whether she is. If you're getting a lot of adverse headlines all the time, you're either affecting change or you're firefighting. If you're firefighting, then you're not really on top of the job.
Yeah. Dubai too are treated worse than animals, says Mother. I'm not sure exactly their status at the moment, but they were remanded in custody on Sunday night, and they were taken.
Saturday, and there wasn't there an application then on Sunday, and there's been some issue about them having been named, but that's what you're supposed to do if somebody appears in the court, so you don't misidentify people. But I think inevitably people are going to look at what might have been naive or misguided and compare it to what others perceive as a different set of rules for, say, the private school that had access to the vaccination.
Well, exactly, yeah, and it seems to have taken that off the headlines as well, isn't it? That aspect of it. You know.
Well, I mean, it's got kind of
yeah, it's got everything.
Elements, hasn't it?
It does. Yeah, certainly for tabloid consumption. Biden threat to Irish tax regime.
Well, that's also been threatened by his predecessors, and I mean, I think there has to be some realization in Ireland. I've certainly seen people acknowledge it, that the day will come when that changes. I think I saw, it might have been Krugman, one of the economists, pointing out that we're just looking at the kind of regime that exists for big multinationals or big corporates in America, that they don't pay tax, and others have pointed out that the tax code has never been written by poor people.
Well, indeed, and also, I mean, in terms of that, they're looking for a global tax base for every country. I mean, again, this is conspiracy theorists are again correct.
Well, I mean, at the moment, it's quite Byzantine, Indonesian. If you look at the Irish and the Dutch, kind of, I mean, they are conforming to the rules. They are paying what's due. They're just repatriating the profits at a certain time. And it means Ireland's GDP has been utterly unreliable because.
Yes, of course, but I mean, it is a pillar of sovereignty, isn't it, to be able to set your own tax rate, I guess.
Yes, but sovereignty is pooled and shared. It has to be these days, and certainly we've always known that the French and the Germans have wanted to get into have a slice of the action when it comes to that investment, that FDI, and want to have a greater kind of Europe-wide uniform taxation base. And the Americans are talking about it, but we're always going to find the large companies, banks, and they're going to probably be more agile than governments. And
yeah, and who's going to take them to court? I mean, because I mean, we defended ourselves against ourselves almost, didn't we, in the Apple case?
But I can understand at one level that, not least because Apple have been in Ireland since 1980, at a time when Ireland was not. It was an entirely different place, and there is a very strong emotional attachment to Apple, particularly in core.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and it was the first of that. But I mean, the romantic or the kind of sentimental connection is one thing. You know, there are serious.
Oh, accountants are not very sentimental or emotional about it. That's why you have this very fleet of foot capital that goes from one country or one regime to another. We saw it here with the very loud Brexiteers. Two of the most prominent of them, businessmen who were supposed to be bringing investment into Britain, subsequently relocated, one to Monaco and another to, I think, Singapore, Dyson, and the other gentleman who owns Ineos.
Oh yeah. Can I just show you a prime time of rejig their studio tonight? I don't know if you've seen this. Have you?
I wouldn't have, no.
No, it's extraordinary set. Looks like, I don't know, the 90s. Anyway, you decide.
I think what's on the tip of your lip is the Day-to-Day and Chris Morris.
Yeah, it is a bit like that, but it's even kind of, more.
The tip of your tongue, I should have said.
Yeah, yeah, it's more acidic almost. That's the new logo. Hang on, excuse me. This is, just give me 1 second. I'll find there's a, a photograph, but
well, logos are one thing. It's the quality of the journalism that would be the issue, and that requires time. It requires investment.
Yeah. No, I just said this is a kind of a light thing. Not really. I'm not trying to be serious, but it really is a kind of extraordinary set. There you are now. Hang on 1 second. And they had a new presenter tonight, Sarah McInerney. Are you familiar with Sarah McInerney?
I think I have heard her on the radio on occasion, and she's been quite impressive.
Yeah, she was interviewing Stephen Donnelly tonight. Now there's the. Can you see that?
Yes, but we can all do that with Zoom and back screens anyway. I mean, that's just a couple of green screens, and it's got one kind of modular desk, so they're away from each other.
It's like the Lloyd's building on acid.
Well, I was going to say acid. I was going to say it's like Hunter S. Thompson having an acid dream in Las Vegas.
yeah, with Stephen Donnelly and
yeah, I think at that point you'd go into cold turkey.
Yeah, but it's a long way from kind of today tonight. Yeah, something stuck. The letters stuck at the back of the guys of the studio. So it's all very very glamorous. I've never seen anything like that, quite like that, in terms of.
Well, you get a whole syntax to kind of studio presentation. There's a presenter here, I think, who's joining GB News, Simon. I think it's McCoy, but he famously, a couple of years ago, went to do his standing piece to camera at the BBC, where they're supposed to hold iPads, and he'd actually picked up a ream of copy paper and presented the whole show with it obliviously. I think there was a presenter on Channel 5 News when it started 25 years ago, and their whole new radical approach was to stand rather than sit behind a desk. And so it becomes the vogue, and then others pick it up. And it all started over with you get it now, the weather people or forecasters becoming personalities. A lot of that's imported from the States.
Yeah, I think they've kind of stopped the standing up thing. They did that for a while, and it just became too silly or something. I mean, they had like holograms, didn't they? Interviewing people, interviewing holograms. Anyway, moving on to I think the Guardian. Oh yeah, the Telegraph headline: "Pause jabs for young until safety is certain," says advisor.
Which is what we were saying earlier. It's the risk ratio changes quite significantly as you get older. Older people are much more at risk of catching COVID and of dying from COVID than they are of serious injury from the AstraZeneca. Younger people because all vaccinations carry a risk, younger people are at less risk of COVID, therefore proportionately the vaccination carries a higher risk.
Yeah, just in the Guardian, David Cameron has ghosted Britain over Green. So ghosted, that's the dating term, isn't it? Like when you.
Yes, or if you just refuse to answer, you don't take calls. But I mean, he was notorious for that when he had, as Marina Hyde makes the point in that particular piece. She quotes, I think, Janine Gibson, who when she was media editor of The Guardian, rang to talk to the comms director of Carlton, which was one David Cameron, who notoriously did not like imparting information or talking to people. So he pretended that he wasn't there, and he pretended to be the cleaner. And that's the one-page job that other than Prime Ministers have been known to have, and his one for Purcell.
Wow. Good Lord. Yeah, he was MD at Carlton, wasn't he? Or?
No, he wasn't. He was comms. Michael Green ran Carlton. He was in the comms job, and the Carlton eventually merged with I think it was Granada.
Yeah, didn't they sit on a big pedophile ring story Roger Cook thing? Carlton did. mentioning Tory MPs?
I don't know the short answer to that. I can't. I know that there was one particular supposed scandal, which was subsequently turned out to be a rather fanciful individual leading people on, but a number of people lost the run of themselves, including in the Met. But I mean, I can't answer that. I don't know.
No. Anyway, a dirty blot, aren't they? Really, that Bullingdon set or whatever club. Tax betting firms.
Let's just walk that back a bit, though. We are not suggesting that David Cameron ever covered up a particular paedophile ring. So, for the purposes of any.
Oh yeah, no.
And the reference that Marina Hyde is making in there is to Purcell, the company I mentioned the other week that has turned a rather buccaneering financier who managed to talk his way into David Cameron's office, along with a private line and an email address at the heart of Downing Street, who had proposed, I mean, it was part of their supposed modernisation of the government agenda, but who had proposed that they pay the government's creditors as some kind of bridging finance, or taking, particularly for, say, they pay pharmacists for NHS prescriptions, and they would take a slice of that action. And the other person who appears to have been in favour of that scheme was who died 3 years ago, was the cabinet secretary, whose reputation had been quite good, but the mezzanine finances we referred to earlier in the case of Purcell include a mining company up north at Chapel, which looks like several jobs are now at risk. There's a lot of knock-on effects that are, which we've seen will go. Deutsche Bank saw a number of executives announce their resignations today because they were exposed on that, and they were exposed on Archego as well.
Indeed, yeah.
So, but Cameron is refusing to answer any questions about his involvement in using influence to press Rishi Sunak and others to get finance of up to $1 billion for the company and for others, because he doesn't believe he is answerable to anybody. And people have pointed out that he is on his 116,000 allowance as a former prime minister in office, and they're the points that she makes in that piece.
Right, and he's a Privy Council member and all that. I mean,
yes, he would be. Yeah.
All that shenanigans. I mean, he will have to answer. You know, I mean, knowing the British press, I mean, he will. May not be today, but it's going to happen. You know. One hopes. Oxford jab trial posed amid fear of blood clots. That's it. Starring role for Prince Harry in Sussex's first Netflix show. This app creator has been made a billionaire. It's a feminist dating app.
Well, aren't they what you call? I don't know about her particular one, but aren't they there's an amount of they call a lot of these initiatives until they get their first initial public offering unicorns.
Well, yeah.
So he's. I mean, the only people who really seem to have broken through that and turned into serious money makers are the Collison brothers, because Stripe, their application, is the one that is used on any kind of, well, on any startup and on any of the large mega finance platforms and retail platforms.
Yeah, I mean, that's an extraordinary. The Stripe story really is amazing, isn't it?
Well, they seem to put the effort in. A lot of these companies get what they call runway, whether they be Uber or Tesla, including WeWork. They get years of loss making in the hope of eventually being floated and making serious money.
Yeah.
But Stripe does appear to be seriously solvent.
I see Deliveroo, Kim Cropper there.
From some of the suggestions, yes, if you their float seriously disappointed. I think even Rishi Sunak was asked about it last week. But I think there's a story suggesting that Goldman Sachs primed it quite considerably by putting a lot of money into it to try and keep the price up.
Yeah.
They're the people who also wedged Greece into the euro by with it causing the knock-on effect we all know so well from just over a decade ago.
Yeah, good old Goldman Sachs. They never fail to disappoint.
I think it was Rolling Stone that's supposed to the giant vampire squid with its wrapped around the face of global finance, and that was Rolling Stone about 10 or 12 years ago, and still seems to. It's a description that people turn to frequently.
Yeah, it's a very good one. This Bridgerton star, he's been tipped to play James Bond, is that?
Well, it's a rite of passage, isn't it, for any? I think the young actor in Normal People went through it, and it's something that you'll just learn to go through, enjoy the attention, and don't have your head turned too much by it.
No, but I mean, it could be. I mean, if they're looking to get a sort of a black Bond,
there's no shortage of talented, charismatic black actors around.
Yeah, I thought Idris Elba would be would play good Bond.
Idris Elba is good at anything he plays at. He might be possibly a bit old for the part now, but
sure,
but it's also very, very. It's hugely lucrative, but very, very constraining.
Yeah, and I don't think like Daniel Craig just looks so unhappy since he landed the role. In fact,
well, he admits he made an awful lot of money from it, and he's a very committed actor. But I don't know if you've seen some of the memes on social media, because the release of the current James Bond film has been delayed so many times now. I think there was a picture of the late Sid James on a moped with the caption "Daniel Craig finally doing the publicity tour for the latest James Bond now that it's been released."
That's good. That is good. Yeah, it's 2 years. It will be 2 years late, won't it?
Yes, something like that. Yeah.
I heard there was a virus element to the film, that there was a pandemic aspect that they wanted to remove. Was that?
I don't think they've been too worried about taste or sensibility in the past.
Right. Or maybe they wanted to add a pandemic.
I think they have a very proven business model which relies on the theatrical releases, and even the streaming, they would be leaving, as they would see it, a significant amount of money on the table. These are very, very sophisticated financial engines or machines in terms of the employment they bring, the filming, and then all the marketing. So I don't know how. I think they all want to ensure that they get their usual slice of profit from what are usually significant money makers. Interestingly, I think the person who was probably the most profitable James Bond, because he did really well in the Eastern markets, was Roger Moore.
In the Eastern markets, they liked him in Asia and stuff. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Were you a Connery man?
James Bond always leaves me cold. I much prefer Harry Palmer.
Right. Yeah.
The Len Dayton character.
Yeah, Michael Caine. Sort of the anti-Bond, wasn't he? He was kind of cook.
Yes. Until Ken Russell went bonkers with them.
Oh, did he do the $1 Million Brain? No.
$1 Billion Brain and Funeral in Berlin. But $1 Billion Brain was the one that completely lost the plot. Len Dayton, the author, is actually a more interesting character himself. If you read his biography, the creator, he lived in Blackrock, County Louth for a while, availing of the author's tax exemption. But he was, you could certainly see that there were elements of him and Harry Palmer, particularly when he worked on airlines and had his cookery books and did different things. But you can see that in the character, particularly in If Press File.
Yeah, because I mean, technically, effectively, Bond was Fleming, wasn't he? I mean,
with all the misogyny, and the rampant consumerism, and Kennedy was supposedly a huge fan, and the books themselves have a kind of more austere tone. But with the particular Sobrani cigarettes, or the Don Bill lighter, or the German street shirts and Savaro suits, no, they'd appeal to a post-war generation as well.
Definitely.
Still coming through rationing.
Yeah, they certainly lack a spirituality, but I mean, I have to say, yeah, the books are incredibly, like, every sentence very sort of spring forward, don't they?
Yes.
It's they're a great read. More, I thought, was very good on The Spy Loved Me, but then it just got very weird, octopusy. You two just became like.
Oh, look! I remember going to see them in the cinema, falling asleep, and just completely wondering what the plot was. And the only interesting bit was I found it's not this was the bit at the beginning, which had a completely separate production unit before the credits came up. But then when Craig came with Casino Royale, they found that the ante had been raised considerably by the Bourne films, and particularly the latter two of them. So you had a much harder kind of neo-realist, not neo-realist, it's still James Bond, but sort of more in-your-face approach, which Craig is particularly good at. I think Greengrass did the Bourne films, with certainly the latter two, but they're big business, and I mean there are people still wedded to them. You find ITV bidding for the rights regularly to show them on bank holidays, even though there can't be anybody who hasn't seen them, but they are streamed, they are available. There's a whole generation of people, and you'll find a few of them amongst the Brexiteers and the European Research Group, who have difficulty distinguishing between reality and the fantasy.
I wish they'd shoot a Bond movie in Ireland, even a little bit of Ireland,
Well, it would be a big, the person to, isn't it Morgan O'Sullivan, who's the person to talk to on that?
He should. Oh yeah, Goldman bought 70 million of shares and delivered to lift price on debut. So the house always wins in a way, doesn't it? I mean,
and the story underneath it. Did I say Deutsche Bank earlier? It's Credit Suisse. Fired top executives over 4.7 billion losses from the failure of Archivos. And as I said, the chap Bill Huang, I think is his name, who'd been had amassed a fortune for his company of I think it was private equity of something like 50-60 billion, has seen it wiped out, according to some of the reports in New York at the moment.
And what was it, a Ponzi scheme or some kind of?
No, it was Archivos.
Oh, right, but okay. Now Blackmore has a Grand National History in your slides. You're not a racing man.
I'm not. I'm afraid I'm the wrong person to ask.
Okay. And the Star, a cold shower fixes your brain.
Well,
it's an urge to.
Should wake you up at least. But,
I do the cold shower thing, I must say. I don't have hot showers. But I don't think it improves the brain that much. Okay, is there anything else there on the Star? Diana, she'd hate boys' rift, says Piers.
I know something Sherlock to that one.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Diana would have loved the ongoing continuing battle between her sons. Bernard, sorry, do you want to?
No, go on.
Busy week ahead?
Well, always. We're trying to trying to get a gallon into a pint. But that's the same for you. It's the same for anybody, really, isn't it?
Yeah. We'll have a very good week, and hopefully we'll see you next Tuesday.
Absolutely. Take care.